Ever gazed up at the towering stone walls of a medieval castle and wondered what it was really like to live there? We see them in movies, grand feasts, noble knights, kings and queens. But beyond the Hollywood glamour, what was the day-to-day reality for the hundreds of people who called a castle home? Was it all tapestries and trumpets? Or was there a grittier, more surprising side to life within those formidable fortifications? Today, we're not just admiring the architecture. We're flinging open the heavy oak doors and stepping inside. We'll walk the drafty halls, peek into the smoky kitchens, and even climb the windswept battlements to discover what life was truly like for everyone from the mighty lord to the humblest servant inside a medieval castle. So, grab a torch, metaphorical, of course, and let's explore. Now, the first thing to understand is that a medieval castle wasn't just a home. It was a bustling, self-contained world. Think of it less as a stately manor and more as a fortified town, a military base, and a center of power all rolled into one. And just like any town, it had a strict social hierarchy. At the very top, of course, was the lord and lady of the castle. Their life, while privileged, wasn't all leisure. The lord was the ultimate authority. His day could be filled with managing his lands, dispensing justice in the Great Hall, meeting with vassals, planning military campaigns, or inspecting the castle's defenses. He was a ruler, a judge, and a general. His wife, the lady, was far from just a decorative figure. With the lord often away on business or war, the lady was frequently in charge of the day-to-day running of the entire castle. A huge responsibility. This meant managing vast households, overseeing supplies, ensuring the castle was provisioned, and sometimes even organizing its defense. She was also expected to be a skilled diplomat and in her own right, entertaining important guests and maintaining social alliances. And yes, there was embroidery and music, but there was also serious administration. Their private chambers, often located in the safest part of the castle, the keep or a dedicated tower, offered a degree of comfort unimaginable to most. They might have larger windows, though still small by our standards, and likely covered with wooden shutters or oiled parchment rather than glass, especially in earlier periods. Tapestries on the walls for insulation and decoration. A proper bed with curtains for warmth and privacy. And perhaps even their own private chapel and latrine. A garderobe, which was essentially a stone seat over a chute that emptied outside the castle walls. Luxury, medieval style, but a castle was much more than just the lord and lady. What about the knights and soldiers? Their lives were a mixture of readiness and routine. A castle garrison could range from a dozen men in peacetime to hundreds, even thousands, during a war or siege. Daily life for a knight involved rigorous training, swordsmanship, horsemanship, jousting practice in the castle bailey. They were the elite fighting force, bound by oaths of loyalty. When not training or fighting, they might be on guard duty, escorting the lord, or even participating in hunts, both a sport and a way to supplement the castle's food supply. They usually slept in communal dormitories or, if they were higher ranking, might have small, shared rooms. Comfort was secondary to function. They needed to be ready to leap into action at a moment's notice. Now, let's venture into the heart of the castle, the Great Hall. This was the main communal space, a hive of activity. It's where the entire household, or at least a significant portion of it, would gather. By day, it was an administrative center, a courtroom, a reception area. By night, it transformed. Trestle tables would be set up for meals, and these meals, especially for the nobility, could be grand affairs. Forget your neat 3-course meal. We're talking multiple courses, often with elaborate dishes designed to impress. Roasted meats, venison, boar, swan, peacock if you were really fancy, pies, stews, and bread. Though, remember, forks weren't common until much later. People ate with knives, spoons, and their fingers. And trenchers, thick slices of stale bread, often served as plates, which might then be given to the poor or the dogs. But the Great Hall wasn't just for eating. It was the entertainment hub. Minstrels would play music, jesters would tell jokes and perform acrobatics, and traveling players might put on a show. It could be loud, smoky from the central hearth, before wall fireplaces became common, and filled with the smells of food, unwashed bodies, and dogs underfoot. Definitely an assault on the senses. For many of the lower-ranking household members, the Great Hall might also be their sleeping quarters. Rolling out a straw mattress on the floor after the tables were cleared. Privacy? Not so much. But who made all this possible? Let's go behind the scenes into the domain of the servants and craftsmen. This was a vast workforce, each person with a specific role. The castle kitchens, for instance, were a world unto themselves. Hot, smoky, and incredibly busy. Cooks, scullions, who did the washing up, a never-ending task. Spit boys, turning roasting meat for hours. They worked from before dawn till late at night, preparing enormous quantities of food over open fires. Then there were the bakers, brewers. Ale was a staple, safer to drink than water. And a whole host of other roles. Chamberlains managing the household, laundresses, grooms tending the horses in the stables, blacksmiths forging and repairing everything from horseshoes to weaponry, carpenters, masons for castle upkeep. The list goes on. These people lived within the castle walls, often in cramped, basic conditions, perhaps sharing small rooms or sleeping in their workplaces. Their lives were about hard work and long hours. But life in a castle, even as a servant, often offered more security and better provisions than being a peasant in a village, especially during troubled times. And let's not forget hygiene and living conditions. We have this image of medieval times as incredibly dirty, and while their standards were different from ours, they weren't entirely oblivious. Castles could be cold and damp. Stone walls aren't great insulators. Rushes, often mixed with sweet-smelling herbs, were strewn on the floors to absorb spills and smells, and were periodically swept out. But with so many people and animals, yes, animals like dogs and hawks were common indoors. Living in close proximity, and with limited sanitation, smells were unavoidable. We mentioned garderobes for the nobility. For others, toilet facilities were often communal privies, sometimes built into the outer walls, or just chamber pots emptied into ditches or the moat. Speaking of the moat, it wasn't the picturesque water feature we imagine. It was often a stagnant, smelly dumping ground for all sorts of waste. Let's just say you wouldn't want to fall in. So, it was noisy, it could be smelly, and it was often crowded. But what about when things got really serious? What happened when a castle came under siege? This is when the castle truly became a fortress. From the inside, a siege was a terrifying and grueling experience. The gates would be barred, the drawbridge raised. Every able-bodied person had a role. Soldiers and knights manned the battlements, firing arrows or crossbow bolts, dropping rocks, or even pouring boiling water or hot sand. Oil was too precious. On attackers trying to scale the walls or break down the gates through murder holes or machicolations. For those not fighting, women, children, the elderly, life became about survival. Food and water were strictly rationed. Disease could spread quickly in crowded conditions. The constant fear of attack, the noise of siege engines pounding the walls, the threat of fire or a breach in the defenses. It was an unimaginably stressful existence. Sieges could last for weeks, months, even years. The objective for the defenders was to outlast the attackers until help arrived or the besieging army gave up. Living through a siege would mean witnessing the brutal reality of medieval warfare up close. But life wasn't all drudgery and danger. Within the castle walls, there were moments of joy and community. Festivals were celebrated with gusto: Christmas, Easter, May Day. There were weddings, births, and feasts for special occasions. Children of the nobility received education. Boys learned martial skills and estate management, while girls learned household management and perhaps reading, writing, and music. Even for the servants, there would have been moments of camaraderie, local feast days, and the simple human interactions that make up any community. Life inside a medieval castle, then, was a complex tapestry woven from threads of power and servitude, danger and festivity, grandeur and grit. It was a microcosm of the medieval world itself. Hierarchical, often harsh, but also vibrant and intensely alive. It was a place of constant activity, a fortress designed for war, but also a home where thousands of people lived, worked, loved, and died. Not always glamorous, certainly not always comfortable by our standards, but undeniably a world teeming with life and its own unique rhythm. So the next time you see a medieval castle, look beyond the imposing stone and imagine the echoes of the countless lives that unfolded within its walls. The clatter of the blacksmith's hammer, the orders shouted from the battlements, the songs in the great hall, the quiet prayers in the chapel, and the everyday conversations of people just like us, living in a very different and truly fascinating time. So the next time you see a medieval castle, look beyond the imposing stone and imagine the echoes of the countless lives that unfolded within its walls. The clatter of the blacksmith's hammer, the orders shouted from the battlements, the songs in the great hall, the quiet prayers in the chapel, and the everyday conversations of people just like us, living in a very different and truly fascinating time.